The Nanjing Massacre, 1937, a 6-week period during which Japanese soldiers murdered and raped thousands of Chinese citizens in the city of Nanjing. The Nanjing Massacre, also known as the Rape of Nanking, was a horrific event that took place during the Second Sino-Japanese War. Over the course of 6 weeks in late 1937 and early 1938, the Japanese army systematically killed and raped hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians in the city of Nanjing, then the capital of China. The massacre remains one of the most brutal and shameful episodes in modern human history, and it serves as a chilling reminder of the atrocities that can be committed in times of war. In this video, we will explore the background, events, and aftermath of the Nanjing Massacre, as well as its impact on Chinese and Japanese relations to this day. In the late 1930s, Japan was expanding its empire throughout Asia, seeking to establish a sphere of influence and secure vital resources such as oil and rubber. In 1937, Japan invaded China and quickly captured Shanghai. The next target was the capital, Nanjing. After capturing Shanghai in late 1937, the Japanese army advanced towards Nanjing, then the capital of China, in early December. On December 9, the Chinese commander of the city, General Tang Shengji, ordered the city's residents to evacuate to safety, but many chose to remain. On December 13, the Japanese army began their attack on Nanjing, and after just a few days of fighting, they had captured the city. With the city in their control, the Japanese soldiers quickly began to commit atrocities against the Chinese population. The Japanese soldiers, who were motivated by a sense of racial superiority and a desire for revenge after years of fighting against the Chinese, were ordered by their commanders to take the city quickly, and they were promised that they could do whatever they wanted once they entered the city. This led to a complete breakdown of discipline, and the soldiers were given free rein to loot, rape, and kill as they pleased. The Japanese military leadership turned a blind eye to their soldiers' actions and even encouraged them to commit atrocities. The soldiers were told that they were fighting a holy war against the Chinese, and they were ordered to show no mercy towards their enemies. For the next 6 weeks, the Japanese army conducted a campaign of terror against the Chinese population of Nanjing. They burned houses, destroyed cultural artifacts, and murdered people indiscriminately. The Japanese soldiers would go on what they called kill all, burn all, loot all rampages through the city, systematically slaughtering civilians. The Chinese soldiers who had not been captured were ordered by their leader, Chiang Kai-shek, to retreat in order to regroup and form a resistance. This left the city defenseless against the Japanese army, who committed terrible acts of violence against the civilian population. Women, children, and the elderly were all targeted by the Japanese soldiers. The Japanese soldiers used a variety of methods to kill their victims, including shooting, beheading, burning, drowning, and burying them alive. Many were also used for bayonet practice or used as live targets for shooting practice. In addition to the mass killings, the Japanese soldiers also engaged in widespread rape and sexual violence. Estimates suggest that as many as 20,000 women were raped, and many were then killed to cover up the evidence of the crime. The exact number of victims of the Nanjing Massacre is still debated, but it is estimated that at least 300,000 Chinese people were killed. In the aftermath of the massacre, the Japanese military leadership tried to cover up their actions by destroying evidence and intimidating witnesses. However, reports of the atrocities soon leaked out to the international community, and the incident became a major point of contention between China and Japan. The Nanjing Massacre had devastating consequences for both the Chinese and the Japanese. For the Chinese, it was a profound trauma that left an indelible mark on the nation's psyche. The brutalization of the civilian population, particularly the widespread rape of women and children, was an affront to the Chinese concept of the rectification of the people, Zhengmin, and represented a violation of the very essence of Chinese identity. The scale and ferocity of the violence inflicted upon Nanjing's citizens was unparalleled in modern Chinese history, and it left deep scars that still resonate to this day. For the Japanese, the Nanjing Massacre was a moral failure of epic proportions that continues to haunt the nation's conscience. The violence inflicted upon the Chinese population in Nanjing was so extreme that it exceeded the boundaries of acceptable behavior in warfare, even by the standards of the time. The brutality of the Japanese soldiers and the failure of their commanders to restrain them represented a betrayal of the Japanese people's values of honor and respect, and it tarnished the nation's reputation in the eyes of the world. The Nanjing Massacre also had wider implications for the Second Sino-Japanese War and for the broader geopolitical landscape of East Asia. The brutalization of the Chinese population fueled Chinese resistance to Japanese occupation and helped to galvanize support for the nationalist government under Chiang Kai-shek. It also contributed to a deep-seated sense of anti-Japanese sentiment among the Chinese people that persists to this day. In Japan, The Nanjing Massacre served as a rallying cry for militarists who sought to further expand Japanese power and influence in Asia. The Japanese government's failure to take responsibility for the massacre, coupled with its ongoing territorial and economic ambitions, contributed to a deteriorating relationship with the West that ultimately culminated in World War II. Overall, the consequences of the Nanjing Massacre were profound and far-reaching. The violence inflicted upon Nanjing's citizens represented a moral failure of epic proportions, and it had significant geopolitical implications that continue to shape East Asian politics to this day. In conclusion, the Nanjing Massacre was a tragic event that had devastating consequences for both the Chinese and the Japanese. The violence inflicted upon the civilian population was beyond measure, and it left deep scars on the psyche of the Chinese people while tarnishing the reputation of Japan. As we remember the victims of this terrible tragedy, it is important to recognize the immense suffering and trauma that they endured. We extend our deepest sympathies to the survivors and the families of those who lost their lives. But remembrance alone is not enough. It is incumbent upon us to learn from this dark chapter in human history and work to ensure that such atrocities never happen again. We must stand up against violence, oppression, and discrimination in all its forms and work towards building a world that is just and equitable for all. We urge you to join us in this cause by subscribing to our channel and sharing this video with your friends and family. By spreading awareness and understanding, we can build a better future for ourselves and for generations to come.